Hello and welcome to the Let's Talk Azure podcast with your host Sam Foote
and Anne Armstrong.
If you're new here, we're a pair of Azure and Microsoft 365 focused IT security professionals.
It's episode 6 of season 7. Sam and I are going to have a discussion around how important it is to secure and monitor your identity providers. With AI adoption increasing, identity and access management is a key factor for securing access to your services and data. Here are a few things we covered. So, why is it important to monitor your identities? What is Identity Threat Detection Response, ITDR? How does Microsoft provide ITDR even? And how is it licensed?
We've noticed that a large number of you aren't subscribed, so if you do enjoy our podcast, please do consider subscribing. It would mean a lot to us for you to show your support to the show.
It's going to be a good episode, so let's dive in.
Hey Alan, how are you this week?
Hey Sam, not doing too bad. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. You all packed, ready to go?
Pretty much. This week's gone so quickly that, yes. I'm mostly packed, I think. Just making sure I've got all my paperwork for the customs and stuff.
Yeah, you're probably on a couple of lists, I would have thought, at this point. Tell us what you're doing back at the mothership.
So going over to Redmond, and I'm going to the Microsoft MVP Summit. So get to do loads of sessions with the product groups around various topics and it's all under NDA, so I can't even say what I find out. So, but I can tell you that it's going to be really good. So yeah, it is going to be good to catch up with product group and stuff like that, and the other MVPs, because I do keep in contact with some of them, or whenever we're at Ignite and things like that, we all catch up. So it'd be good to catch up with them all in one place. So yeah, should be good.
Yeah, no, it sounds really good, and yeah, good on you for making the effort to go, because it's not exactly hop in the car. It's a proper track.
Oh, you're back.
Oh, sorry. Did I have a issue with the recording again?
Yeah, he disappeared.
Oh, okay, yeah. No, I was just saying, it's good that you make the trip back, because yeah, it's a lot of it's a lot of travel for, what is it, 4 days or something like that.
Yeah, it is. But it is online as well. But it's very difficult to. The event is limited on site. There's only so many spaces, kind of thing, across. Because this is for all MVP. It's not just security, so it's not like it's the 300 of us in the world that are security based MVPs. It's the whole all categories. So, but yeah. So I have done it remote before, but it's very difficult I feel like it's difficult in the UK with doing work in the daytime and then having to stay up super late to catch all the sessions.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So, Alan, what we talking about this week?
So we're going to talk about identity. I think we've probably done it a couple of times. We might have done it. We haven't done it this season. Maybe done it last season. Probably talk about updates around identity stuff, but I think it's worth talking generally about ITDR. I'll get it right this time instead of like I did in the intro. Identity threat detect and response. We always talk about Defender for endpoint and its EDR capability. It's kind of going on some of that, but from an identity perspective. So I think it's worth talking about with identity being a key part again. Well, it's always been a key part to secure, but even more now with AI being used everywhere. Yeah,
definitely. Yeah, because our identities aren't just people anymore, are they? I suppose so. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, let's start from the beginning, I suppose. Yeah. Why is it important to monitor identities in our organizations?
Yeah, so if let's go back a few years, back in time.
Back in my day.
Yeah, back in my day. No, back when everything was on prem. So it is kind of go back in the old days sort of thing, mostly. When cloud wasn't a thing or it was very limited, your perimeter was your network, your firewalls, almost like a castle, you didn't have to worry too much about, identity being pwned from, outside the organization. It would always be, the only risk you'd have is if someone did something internally, was on the network itself and be able to compromise accounts and things like that. So the risk was lower, then, and it was more around, AV, antivirus, malware, viruses, that kind of thing, really. And then that, compromising identities on premise at that point. And then obviously we had the cloud era, moving to 365, things like that. And then that perimeter kind of disappeared, because we were now allowing access from almost anywhere, because it's a cloud service, can log on from anywhere. And I think initially, those systems were set up to say, hey, you're only allowed to log on from the on-premise network, from a VPN, trying to rein in that cloud identity back onto on-prem and to secure it using your network perimeter again. Then COVID happened. I think that was a key, what's the word for it? Influencer on being able to work from anywhere, working from home, all that sort of thing. That meant that perimeter had disappeared from on-prem, and that now users were working from home maybe not in COVID time. Well, in COVID time we were working from home, but not from coffee shops. But it's escalated now to coffee shops, on the train, wherever it might be, on the plane now, because Wi-Fi is getting better on planes and things like that, if you really want to work on a plane. But so yeah, identity is everywhere, accessible from anywhere. How do we look to secure it? Now, we've got some of the technology in conditional access, in Entra, all that kind of stuff. But that's not looking for necessarily unusual behavior or impossible travel. There are some stuff baked into some of the protections, but that's what we're going to talk about, why we have those in place. So you don't really have anything to monitor, those sign-ins constantly. Yes, you may have a SOC that's looking after it, but imagine how many sign-ins you might have for like an 8,000, 9,000 organization. Everyone signs in at 9 o'clock in the morning. That's 1,000 or 8,000 sign-in, events, plus, every app they then sign in, it's you're looking at thousands upon thousands of events to look at, and yes, the SIEM can look for, build queries, say if I see X, Y, Z, create alerts, that kind of thing. But, the attack plane is changing all the time. There's new possible attacks, token theft we've talked about in the past, various other, types of attacks, coming in, trying to bypass where they can, and using MFA, where they can. We've heard of MFA fatigue being an option, being a potential attack where someone keeps trying, and then the user just goes, "Oh yeah, just say yes," because then it just keeps it, it stops. My phone stops alerting me, kind of thing. Silly things like that you don't necessarily see or identify, and that's why it's important to start looking at monitoring all of your identity sort of areas, identity providers, where you can, on-prem AD if you've got it, Entra, Okta, we're not just talking about Microsoft here, and Okta is an IDP, some of the other ones out there, maybe your privileged access management system, CyberArks, the Beyonds, the various, things like that, being able to monitor all those in one place. Yes, okay, you can bring them into a SIEM, but where there may not be any logic there to help, or machine learning potentially that is bringing in, being able to adapt to new changes and threat intelligence data. So, today is important, and again with artificial intelligence, as you kind of alluded, Sam, we're now starting to look at agents non-human identities now, being able to access information on behalf of you or on behalf of the system. So we now need to think about, how we monitor, secure those as well.
Yeah, and I think one thing that I've seen a lot is not just, if we think about like humans breaching like AI like agent identities, but it's actual AI like identities breaching other AI identities, if that makes sense, right? Because we're now these types of attacks, they're not, it's not just it's not manual anymore. It's highly automated, isn't it? And we're seeing, more and more like weaponization of all sorts of different automation and AI tools. So, I don't think it really matters what type of identity it is. It just all has to be monitored, doesn't it? Because it's like you say, it's like that perimeter now, isn't it? It's I don't know, arguably one of the most important things, especially with cloud identities that can be seemingly accessed from anywhere, right? It's really big. It's a huge part of security.
Yeah, I mean, let's take the example of, have you heard about the recent compromise of Striker?
No.
Okay, so Striker, again, I don't have the full details, but in effect, all their machines were wiped. Not from a ransomware perspective. What happened was that an account was compromised that had admin rights, and they used the Graph API to call Intune and tell it to wipe all their laptops.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So, and that's it's tooling that's valid, to be used, but
and how simple is it to create that tool? Trivial, isn't it? Right? Because once you do have Graph API access, as a admin, aka, God mode, right? You can just automate all of that, and it's just, and that's just from like actual Graph. That's not even talking about like the private API endpoints. Well, the non-public API endpoints that can be bound with certain tokens and whatnot, right? And these a lot of these attackers are sophisticated. They're not just, sort of drive-by, type attacks, right? So,
no, exactly. And that's a slightly different one that RBAC, well, it is identity related, RBAC, lowest privileged, just-in-time access, PIM. It's not necessarily we're not necessarily talking too much around this today, because we're talking about how we monitor it and do the detections, but that is all key, because be able to elevate to a role that allows you to do that. If you use Entra's privileged identity management, someone gets alerted that role got elevated, or you put approvals in it. There's mechanism to slow it down. There'll always be potential ways to not necessarily get round it, but it just might slow bits down. Same thing in Intune. You can put in approvals for certain actions like wipe into the processor. So, basically admin approval, almost just-in-time access to perform an action. So there are other things in place to slow things down. That's not to say the bad actor could then go and change it so the approvers themselves and all that sort of stuff. But again, depending on what role they've acquired, but that it's all around. Some of that other stuff is slowing them down so detections can identify it, or real users or managed services can see it. Because getting access and running a graph query, I bet that took seconds.
Yeah, exactly.
To do it would have been mass, bulk action, wipe all these devices. Are you sure? Yes, bang, done.
Yeah, exactly.
Commands gone out from Intune. Wait till they sync.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the slowest part probably was the sync, right?
Yeah, exactly. So
Intune dig there, right? Yeah. So what is ITDR?
Yeah, you said it the right way because I've
I
written it
did.
down the right way.
Yeah,
In fact,
my
it's still in
brain.
the thing. It's still in the list of things as the wrong way. So, ITDR is we're editing at the same time, I think. Identity, Threat, Detect, and Response is what it stands for, and this is in effect the bringing all those logs from all the signals from all of the various identity solutions that you have. Bring them in one place, allowing them to correlate, because again, seeing someone sign in from a bad location, accessing something from from Active Directory and then moving to the cloud, and then activating a role in a privileged access management system, be able to identify all those sort of tasks, brings that risk score up for that type of activity. So in effect, IDTR is looking at some of the key features like real-time signal correlation, so bringing all those signals to one place, changing the risk of a user's in its inventory, so you can identify which ones you might need to look at. It's also meant to be around bringing collaboration between teams, so being able to give an idea to the identity team how good, bad, what activities happening within the identity space, but allowing the SOC, the analysts, the security teams to be able to see the security aspect of it all as well and how it's being used. So it's bringing those sort of two teams together. Like I said before, behavior analytics, so being able to identify unusual behavior or normal behavior within the identities to look for that unusual activity, so you can flag it early. And then it's almost the detections, bringing that into one place, but also the automatic response and be able to respond to either of those systems. So bringing it all into one place, so it's easy to consume as a security, identity engineer, analyst, but also allowing the system to help detect across all of it because of the behavior, but also be able to respond quickly from that side. So yeah, it's very key to start thinking around it. We have it for, we have XDR, extended detect and respond. This is part of those systems as well now. Just separate it out because we have EDR, didn't we? So we still have EDR, but it's just bundled with everything else. So endpoint detect and response. So it's instead of looking at devices and what's happening there, we're now looking at identities from that perspective.
Yeah, okay. So it's similar to other like threat protection, in the same sort of buckets as other threat protection, scenarios, but it's wholly focused on identity. So I suppose the key question is what does Microsoft provide, as a ITDR solution?
Yeah, so they probably had. I think the term ITDR is, I say like new, but it's probably been out for a year and a half, maybe a couple of years now, as terminology of something for this. But Microsoft have always looked at the on-premise like identity as always a key thing. So Defender for Identity is in effect Defender for Identity and identity protection in Entra is basically the main tooling for Microsoft to sort of feed into their ITDR solution, or the licensing mechanism, whichever you want to look at it. For if we talk about endpoint protection, not endpoint protection, identity protection in Entra, that's been around for some time. Kind of on its own sort of originally, but now been feeding into the XDR portal and now, the ITDR part. So that is looking at the trillions of signals that Microsoft gets from all the tenants and from its, data sources that it's collecting, from the failed sign-ins to multiple tenants, or from that people hacking Xbox and the standard the personal Microsoft accounts, or their partnership with other security providers, bringing all that signal into one place, the intelligent security graph. It's using that data to understand, risks from users, bad passwords or breached passwords or exposed passwords, whichever you want to use it, that they've identified, and bring that all in to give a risk on a user, and that then correlating with other activity, from the other Defender products like Endpoint, Cloud Apps, etc. So that's one sort of key. So that's looking at Entra and sign-ins, and that can then feed into automatic response, in the sense that if you've got a high-risk user, we can use conditional access to say they require MFA or block access, that kind of thing. So quite flexible about how you give someone access based on their risk level. Now, Defender for Identity originated from it used to be called ATA, which is Advanced Threat Analytics, for on-prem, and it used to be an on-prem server, in effect, that would monitor your Active Directory sign-ins and everything, and look for unusual behavior, and then alert on it. But really, it was only just a monitoring tool. It never did any actions or respond to anything. It was more just, hey, the site happening, you need to go and fix it. That then morphed into Advanced Threat Protection, which was in effect Defender for Identity today. And that was a cloud service that then monitored your on-prem AD with sensors and things like that. Probably in the last 6 months, 9 months, that's changed slightly, in that, yes, you still have that on-prem identity like feed using Defender for Identity and the sensors. But now Microsoft started moving into not just on-prem and, their Entra sort of feeds, because, as we sort of move forward, the idea is that on-prem AD looks to be replaced with just being cloud identities. Now, don't get me wrong, that's, for some organizations, that is years away because of integrations, things like that. But I suppose that's the vision, the end goal for some organizations, to move to cloud only. And some organizations that are new start cloud only. They don't start with on-prem AD. So, that part of Defender for Identity almost became, I suppose, redundant a little bit, because if you haven't got it, you can't use it. So Microsoft are now morphed into using, now integrating with some of the other services. So the first one they've done is Okta as an IDP, identity provider. Now that provides the ability to see the accounts, the inventory, so pulling that into the ITDR portal, the identities as assets, does a security posture against Okta as well, so almost feeding into the exposure management side of things. It also starts to look at suspicious activity, and also allows you to do advanced hunting on Okta activity as well. So that's quite powerful, being able to pull that data in, because beforehand, you could get that into Sentinel, no problem. But then you've got there'd be content to build on that unusual activity, but the machine learning that's in XDR wouldn't necessarily be able to consume that from an identity perspective and correlate as well. Maybe today, with Sentinel being in the portal, maybe there'd be more view of that. But it's bringing it into that same area, and then you're seeing it, that identity side of things in one place. So I think that's very key. So that's one part, and that's probably, at the moment, that's the only identity provider they're bringing in at the moment, with future ones to come later down the road. But the other area that they've started to integrate is the privileged access management systems, which I kind of talked about earlier. So these systems are used to provide just-in-time access, manage, accounts so you don't see the passwords and things like that, and they're rotated every time you use them, etc. It provides, some areas like just enough access, so only giving you certain roles, things like that. And the idea of these systems as well is to monitor what you're doing, in these sessions, to make sure that, if there's an incident or anything like that that's caused by you making a change, it's tracked about what you did, things like that, so you can either understand what happened, where the risk or why the issue happened, be able to resolve it later, or if you are deemed as being a bad, internal bad actor or insider risk, they've got the audit log, the recording of you performing the action that caused X, Y, Z. So these are very key to monitor as well, and again could go into Sentinel, but now this is able to be consumed by, in effect, Defender for Identity, the ITDR part, to look for unusual behavior, things like that in there. So again, bringing it all together. So if you had Entra, Okta, and then say CyberArk as an example, you can see all that activity in one place. Someone signing into CyberArk to gain access to a privileged account, that privileged account then going through Okta to sign in and do MFA, and then see the sign into what applications they were in Entra, and it will all be tied together, from in the system, being able to correlate quite easily. So I think that's very key from that part.
Yeah, definitely. And that, I suppose that what's the best way of describing it is the distribution of identities in organizations is a real challenge, isn't it? Because there's so many different, not even just what I would call core identity providers, but also other like SaaS applications that have their own identity structures inside them as well, right? It's not just a case of just thinking about Active Directory and Entra, is it? You need to think wider than that as well. Anything that's got access to privileged data, is also incredibly important, right? So,
yeah, and to be fair, if you do think about SaaS services, the ones that are compatible with Defender for Cloud Apps brings that activity and sign in of information into the ITDR as well.
Yeah, and I think that's because we have seen, just generally across the board, across the board from Microsoft, from a security perspective, they have, they're spending a huge amount of time and resource in data consolidation, aren't they? And integration, right? Who would have thought they would have been integrating Okta? You would have thought it would have been a walled garden where they said, no, Okta doesn't exist in our ecosystem, in our universe. Let's just pretend it doesn't. But it does. And and so, I'm sure they got a lot of that feedback, anyway. So I think that, that's when you're thinking about these types of systems, you do need to think about, whatever provider that you go with, that they do have the correct integrations in place so you can get as much visibility as possible, Yeah.
And to be fair, I've just talked about visibility. The other benefit to this is that you can, it's two parts. One is, if you see an identity, you can 3 dots on it, and anyone who uses Defender will know what I mean by 3 dots, but the set, the options for an identity, and you can reset the password in Okta, in CyberArk, remove the session, which you can do. Obviously, you can do that on-prem AD and Entra, reset sessions or reset password and things like that. This is now jumping into those other third-party systems and allowing you to do it from one point. So, a SOC analyst is able to remediate or reset, stop, a bad actor in its tracks by just in one portal. Don't have to then contact the customer if they're a third party, ask them to log into Okta and reset someone's account, or have to have a permission to that system, because it's all done from one portal.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. So, yeah, like you say, it's not just about data; it's also about operationalizing, that activity.
Yeah, and the second part of that is with other ITDR solutions will have it as well, but it's got automatic remediation, disrupt solutions in there, auto disrupt. So if it deems that it should be, it's an account that has been flagged as to not be auto disrupted, it will go off and do that for you. Disable the account, reset all sessions. Machine learning speeds. There you go. I said it. So
no frontier machine learning speed.
Yes,
okay.
Yeah. So being able to automatically remediate before even a SOC analyst gets a chance to look at it. It's already said, right, I've remediated. Now can you just verify that it's now clear, kind of thing, or can we understand how they got in? And then use Security Copilot to help you do that. So yeah, it's definitely very needed in an organization. And even if you just have Entra and on-prem AD, and maybe some SaaS services via Defender for Cloud apps, it's going to be key with that. So
yeah, okay. So I suppose the age-old question in the Microsoft sort of ecosystem universe is, what licenses do you need? How do you get started with it?
So as I kind of alluded to, there's probably two areas. One is Entra IDP2 for Entra identity protection, that side of things. So that's one part, and that's part of E5. Well, it's not called we'll say E5 Security, or the new name Defender Suite. It's part of that. It's part of the Entra Suite as well. So you don't have to go, E5 for everything either, or full E5. And again, you can buy it individually as well. For the sort of the other part, Defender for Identity, again, you can buy it standalone per user, or it's part of the Defender Suite or the full E5 capability. The integrations at the moment, the Okta one is in preview, but as far as I'm aware at the moment, there is no ingestion costs for that to go in. So, and I don't know what the future might be for that data as well. So it may need just to watch that as that sort of evolves. But, potentially if Microsoft do keep it as it's part of the Defender for Identity license kind of thing, because in effect they're probably doing some summarization in the background maybe for some of it, so they don't have to store as much data, if that makes sense. So we'll have to see, but that doesn't look like it. You pay for that at the moment, which means that maybe there is a better way of ingesting Okta data rather than putting it into Sentinel and paying for it. At the moment, anyway. Okta licenses, though, you do need developer or enterprise for that one. And for the privileged access management systems, it doesn't specify if there's any license requirements apart from obviously having it. But the example of like CyberArk has got in effect a plugin on their system in their marketplace that you download to integrate. So they integrate from their side over to Defender. So it's all API driven from that point. But yeah, so a lot of it's probably there's a fair amount of large organizations now that are on E5 security. There are still organizations on E3. Yet to level up to E5 to then go to E7. We had to get that in there somewhere.
All roads.
Yeah, all roads lead to E7. But yeah, a lot of organizations probably already have this technology in place. They just didn't know that they could now integrate their PAM and maybe Okta into the solution. So it's worth looking into to get it all integrated to one thing. And then, yeah, you've got your automatic response from the XDR portal, from Defender, to do disruption. But also you've got almost a single pane of glass. Definitely a single portal, I would say. Maybe not a single pane of glass to see everything, because XDR is absolutely insane now with the amount of tabs and data that's in there. But yeah, you can definitely respond from one portal without having to jump to another portal, which I think is quite key on responding as quick as possible as a human.
Nice. Yeah, well, that's it. I think we're at a stage now where it isn't human response anymore, is it? Like it's just not. It's not able to keep up, is it? Obviously, we need oversight and refinement, and we've got to be confident in that. But on the other side of it, if you really want to defend against a lot of these rapid and advanced, it's like your example of somebody getting access to Graph API and then invoking wipe all machines.
Delete all user accounts.
Yeah, I'm not. I think the connection and the authentication to Graph is quite well understood that should be protected, right? But what about I suppose you're just talking about the identities, I suppose, but it's also what actions are then performed downstream of that, right? Because should even what should the approval process be for bulk action wipe all machines? It really makes you think about how risky these user accounts really are.
Yeah, exactly. And also it's the the example of Graph. Again, it's all around the identity and it's like OAuth, app governance from Defender of Cloud Apps. Again, it's not necessarily ITDR, but it's all identity related. Understanding what permissions an app has, because again, if you've got a third party looking system that's doing some automation for you, that there's something that does automation for Intune that's got a permission that could wipe a device. If they get compromised, it's already connected, ready to go, isn't it? At that point?
Exactly. Yeah,
that's quite scary to think about, really. But
exactly.
That's why you need other mechanisms in place to say, should you be doing this sort of thing?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, crazy.
So, and yeah, PIM is a key example there. If someone wants to elevate to GA, then it should go through an approval process. It should go to somebody to go, is it okay?
Yeah, well, should they be elevating to GA, Alan, or should they just be elevating to the crit role?
but even go to Intune admin.
I know. Yeah, I'm just being just enough access, and PIM advocate, because we won't go into that today because that's an episode by itself.
So yeah, there's loads of things, and like you said, there's other mechanisms to help. Like I said, slow down attacks or put blockers in place. But the first part is the first access. That's your first line
initial
of defense.
Access. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
First line of defense. Make that as hard as possible and monitor the hell out of that. And then, yes, if they get in and go through any further that isn't deemed as unusual, you need to put your next layer of defense in, which is approvals, whatever it might be. So yeah.
Okay, cool. Thanks for that, Alan. And anything else you want to share, or are we going to wrap up there?
No, I didn't think I had anything else. Like I said, it's worth taking a look at what data you have in there. It's been improving over the last 6 months. You can now see your service accounts on AD and what permission they got when they were last used, whether they're, there's loads of data there that is great and scary at the same time. I think it's the fair comment. It's great to see it, but you see all the problems that you might have.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah. Cool. Okay, so did you enjoy this episode? If so, please do consider leaving us a review on Apple, Spotify, or YouTube. This really helps us reach out to more people like yourselves. If you do have any specific feedback or suggestions for episodes, we have a link in our show notes to get in contact.
Yeah, and if you made it this far, thanks ever so much for listening, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Yeah, thanks all.